It's Democracy Day today, and I understand that some of our resource persons are on standby already. Let's welcome Mr. Samson Itodo, who has joined us from our Abuja studio. Mr. Samson Itodo is the executive director of IAGA Africa.
He joins us virtually.
He joins us virtually, and we also have Mr. Dayo Akintobi, media analyst, who joins us from our Abuja studio. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yes, Mr. Akintobi, I'm going to start with you. Mr. Itodo, you would have to unmute so that we can hear you. We couldn't hear you for a bit when you acknowledged the greeting. Mr. Itodo, please unmute. Okay, while we wait for Mr. Itodo to unmute, let's start with... Okay, let's have Mr. Samson Itodo. Mr. Itodo, please unmute. Okay, while we wait for you to mute, I'm sure you began following from the beginning when we went down memory lane, to put up a soundbite from late Chief M.K.O. Abiola, and some of the things that he talked about in that interview. He talked about, allegations of bribery of electoral officers. He talked about quite a number of other things, spending limit, and from some of those things that he said, we can also look at the Ekpetedo Declaration, which is popular for him risking it all, after which he was arrested. I'll just like to read from some of the things that he said in the Ekpetedo Declaration when he declared himself president. He talked about the ills of military rule leading to a nation fighting a civil war with itself, destabilized our nation as not before in its history, military rule impoverishing our people, and introduced dreadful trade in drugs, which has made our country's name an anathema in many parts of the world. Even in soccer, fans going to watch the Green Eagles display in America being made to suffer there needlessly because Nigeria's name is linked with credit card fraud and 419. I'm just wondering how much progress we've made from the ills of that time, which late Chief MKO spoke about, as against what it obtains today. Mr. Akintobi.
Well, when you look at the times in which Chief Abiola spoke back then, and you compare it today, I'd say we've grown in leaps and bounds, and we've made remarkable progress, although there's still a long way to go. One thing that's indisputable is the fact that military rule set Nigeria back decades and decades in progress. A lot of what Chief Abiola complained about were direct results of military rule. And I think the best thing that ever happened to Nigeria is getting the military out of administration and leadership. And in any democratic dispensation whatsoever in Nigeria's history, you'd see that we've made a whole lot more progress than when the military was in power. So the things the chief complained about, today we're in a lot better shape. We have stronger institutions. We've had electoral reform. We've got a legislature now. We've got a judiciary that's still a work in progress, but at least to some extent we can claim that justice is being served at many levels a lot better than it was during the military. So I don't think there's any yardstick by which we can compare the two types of administrations, and I think it would be delusional to say that we haven't done a lot better under civilian rule than when we were in the military administration. Nigeria's international reputation has grown in leaps and bounds. I know that at one point the green passport was a blight on the international scene, but today I think it's a bit better regarded. I think internationally Nigerians are acquitting themselves admirably all over the world. I think we're doing well in terms of international trade and relations with other countries. We were a pariah state under the military. in any democratic dispensation, we're within the Committee of Nations, and we're generally better viewed. So I don't think there's any basis for comparison whatsoever. And I think many of the things the good chief spoke about then have improved markedly.
Mr. Itodo, I'd like you to respond to the same questions, particularly as it has to do with the socio-economic challenges that the late chief spoke about in that soundbite that we played earlier on. How much progress do you think we have made significantly in terms of, bringing, the generality of the people out of poverty, progress in terms of economic reforms, and perhaps you also want to talk about institutional reforms as well.
Thank you very much. Please confirm you can hear me now.
Brilliant. We can hear you now.
Okay, so let me say happy Democracy Day to you all, and also to Nigerians in every part of the world. When I followed the earlier part of this program and I listened to the late Chief M.K. Abiola speak, first I had a pride, and there was that, this reignition of national spirit, in me, because here was a man who understood the complexity of the Nigerian state and who wanted, to bring development through democratic and civil means. And you can clearly see from the remarks that he made, where he was talking about the core foundations of democracy. And some of the things that he complained about, are things that are still evident within our polity. So one would say that after 26 years, Nigeria's democracy does reflect some progress, and we can't argue that. There are progress that we have made, and we will talk about the progress, but our democracy still remains a democracy without democrats. It's a democracy without a democratic culture, and one with very limited development. We're just experiencing a system that is marked by electoral rituals, but it's lacking in values, in institutions and outcomes that define, true governance. So let's look at what progress have we made. To a large extent, when you think about electoralism, when you think about the conduct of elections, we've seen since 1998, or since 1999, till date, we've had successive elections. Yes, so we can see, yes, we've experienced some uninterrupted, whether civilian rule or democratic rule. So that itself is progress. We've also seen alternation of power from one particular political party to another political party. And these transitions of power, from one incumbent to an opposition candidate, it's really a democratic milestone, because we've seen the fact that despite, the competitive nature of those elections, we've not, descended to any form of violence or political instability. We've also seen some measure of legal reforms. And there have been amendments to our constitution that strengthens our institutions. We've seen, some measure of government programs that addresses the concerns of citizens. But the big question is, are we where we are? Are those aspirations of those who fought for our democracy, have those aspirations been met? My answer is no. Yes, democracy is a journey. But if you look across board, do we have Democrats in today's Nigeria? Or what you have are individuals who want political power, not to use same to advance the development of the people. So when you look at the socio-economic profile of Nigerians, in the last 26 years, has it improved? It's a big question that needs to be answered. When you think about a democratic culture, you simply have, at different levels, both at the national and the local level, the question of people who have power, who have repository, who have political power, do not have, the temperament and even the attributes and of tolerance, of dissent. You can't say we are a democracy if we don't tolerate dissent. we are gradually gravitating into a one-party state. What that simply tells you is that in the last 26 years, all the so-called political associations that pride themselves as political parties are completely weak. Because this cross-carpeting is happening because across board, you have weak political parties. And then when you look at the role of media and civil society, and this democracy that we celebrate today, after MK Abiola and all those who fought for return to democracy, we need to celebrate the media, we need to celebrate citizens, and we need to celebrate civil society. That we're still a democratic nation today, it's because of these three different actors working to ensure that constitutionalism and the rule of law is upheld is the reason why we still have conversations about democracy today. Because left for the political class, they prefer a plutocracy as opposed to a democracy that delivers the development, which is food on the table, security, and then the infrastructure that is required to address or provide social benefits.
Mr. Akintobi, let's come back to you. I've always been concerned about our democracy, and I'm happy that we've done 26 years, and I hope that we keep going for the rest of history. But if you look back, you will see that the civilians have always been responsible for eroding democracy, which is why this conversation is very important. And that's why we ask the question whether or not democracy is safe in the hands of the current crop of politicians. The military don't just jump in. From the time they came in 66 to the time they came in, of all the time they came in 83 and all of that, there's something that the civilian authorities were doing wrong to the detriment of the society in that sense. And we can go on and on and on as far as this is concerned. So, Mr. Akintobi, I want you to also maybe piggyback on where Mr. Aitodo has stopped on the issue of the managers of this democracy, the current crop of politicians. It's a mixed bag of everything. Some may be Democrats, some are pseudo-Democrats, some are intellectuals, some are narcissists, some are megalomaniacs. I don't know which portion is more than the other. What's your characterization of the handlers of this democracy, and what are the warnings we should give to all of them? Because what I see and what we're looking at is a mess of the system. One person playing a game in two parties, or multiple people doing all of this. We saw it in 2023. It's just a joke.
When you look at today's politician and you look at yourself in the mirror, there's no difference between the politician and you. So when you ask yourself and you define politicians as megalomaniacs and every other sort of expletive in the dictionary, we're essentially pointing the finger back at ourselves, because the politicians come from within our midst, and their values are a reflection of our collective values as well. So I think that the safety, security, and sustainability of democracy is based on the individuals. It's based on how engaged we are with the political process, how enlightened we are, and how much we hold our politicians accountable. I think today's Nigerian individual is more alert to the dangers of truncating democracy to where they won't allow it to happen. I think we know well enough to be able to speak out. My co-panelist mentioned earlier about civil society organizations, about the media, about citizens. All these are checks and balances against the excesses of politicians. That's not to say that they won't power grab, they won't be corrupt, they won't be self-interested. The average Nigerian politician is in it out of self-interest and not there to serve the interest of the larger public. So without a doubt, but I think there's enough checks and balances in the system that hold them accountable and begin to demand of them certain standards. Of course, some will fall through the cracks, and we've seen that happen with many of our politicians. But at this point in our nation's evolution, I cannot see us deteriorating to a point that democracy will be totally unsafe in the hands of the people we've entrusted the suffrages with today. Granted, it's quite onerous to say that those who are in office got there legitimately, or there are proper choices for office, or that there were not shenanigans involved in how they got there. But now that they're there, I believe we have enough institutions in place to hold them in check. I believe there's an incestuous relationship within the elite. The political elite are the problem of the country, not the grassroots, not even the ethnic, religious element of our politics. No, the real problem with Nigerian politics comes from the elite. And I think that a groundswell of mass engagement of the public is already occurring, and you can see it in uprisings like the Kwankwasia movement in Kano in the last election, where you see mass engagement, mass togetherness, making a point and making their presence and their authority felt. So I think that we overemphasize the risk. For example, I don't think a one-party state is possible in Nigeria. I don't think so. I think we're too divergent. I think we're too marginalized. We're too separated. Yes, it looks like everybody is suddenly defecting to the ruling party now. It looks like the PDP is in disarray, Labour Party, there's infighting, and there's all kinds of cross-carpeting going on, and there's all this talk about, oh, we're drifting towards a one-party state. I don't see that ever happening in Nigeria, because we are not a homogeneous block. We are heterogeneous. We have different ideas, different values, all the things that come to play in politics differ among us as a people. Political parties are just vehicles to actualize ambitions. And once you see that the party you are in can't propel you into office, you're wasting your time in that party, and you'll find a greener pasture that can actualize your ambition. And the moment that ambition is actualized, you discover that there's no actual loyalty to any party per se. Our democracy will evolve to a point to where we are loyal to an ideology. At this point, we're only loyal to our stomachs. We don't have common values that tie us together as a group. We're loyal to stomach infrastructure, and stomach infrastructure is available everywhere. So it's the one that can actualize that for you that you will pursue. So I don't necessarily see cross-carpeting, even though it's betrayal and it's treachery, and I don't subscribe to it, but I don't necessarily see it as risking our democracy to the point that it could truncate it. I don't think at this point that we have any worries about these 26 uninterrupted years being interrupted, because I think we've entrenched democracy in Nigeria well enough to a point that it just needs to now continue to grow and develop.
Mr. Akintobi, let's take it to Mr. Itodo. So, Mr. Itodo, you can see Mr. Akintobi is a mix of, yes, we have a problem, but let's be optimistic. He doesn't see possibility. Well, it's a position he has held. We can go back in history to see how some of these things play out eventually and what trickles down. So one of the things he's raised is to the effect that we are more like one of the challenges we're dealing with, even from the time we're amalgamated. It feels like we're a disparate cluster forced into one homogeneous template. And so once, time and again, especially during electoral cycles, we'll see that fault line being amplified and accentuated in that sense, and we begin to fight ourselves and all of that. But he said, look, the democracy will not collapse 26 years down the line. That is a prayer for everybody. But a sense of justice, a sense of inclusion, sense of belonging. Section 14 of the Constitution used that word, sense of belonging. How do we build a society where whatever decision is made, everybody feels like I had a sense of belonging such that I am on the table? It's just that this idea that ran, that is carried on by the society, I was not able to mobilize enough numbers to advance my own idea, so I'll do better next time. So what I'm saying in essence is we have a problem with the political class. How do we fix it?
No, I think that's a valid question. And I think it's important to note that we're all optimists, and we strongly believe that democracy is a journey, and it's about competition. It's about competition of ideas. It's a struggle, I must say. And I think we're having this conversation because we believe that things can actually work. In the same vein, when democracies collapse, they don't collapse accidentally, they don't collapse in one day. It's the gradual erosion of democratic principles. So if anyone is waiting for democracy to collapse completely, it's not going to happen. But it's a process. So it begins with state capture. A situation where one individual or a set of individuals capture what you call the agencies of protection within a democratic construct. And what are these agencies of protection? The legislature is an agency of protection in a democracy, because what the legislature does, it keeps the executive in check. It ensures that the exercise of executive powers are within the bounds set by the Constitution. In a case where the legislature, whether it's at the state or at the national level, is unable to call the executive to order when it exercises overbearing powers or when it takes actions that are at variance with public interest, what you simply have is a democracy that has no accountability. And that you begin to say that democracy is being eroded because some of those principles of checks and balances are not upheld. Where the parliament, where legislature, approves executive proposals and bills without any form of scrutiny, or when the legislature weaponizes democratic instruments to protect the executive, it is not protecting, interest of the public, as the case may be. And so when you think about managing our diversity, I say that that's one thing we've done poorly. And one beauty of democracy is it has the inherent mechanism that encourages diversity management. A cardinal democratic value is inclusion. And so to what extent has there been representation? Because when you look across the entire country, there are sections of our country who believe that they are not part of decision making. And the question is, are there constitutional safeguards that ensures that this category of people are included, or they are or they participate in decision making? Look at the legislature. And I use the legislature as a classic example because often we focus on the executive. And let's look at the state. How many times do parliamentarians or legislators consult with their people on certain public policy related issues? There's just few. In cases where there are public hearings, there's not sufficient information out there in public for people to participate. So these are the issues. When you also look at power sharing, and by power sharing, I mean devolution of powers. Until recently, that the Supreme Court granted financial or strengthened financial autonomy for local governments, there was total collapse of local governance at the state level. Why? Because of the overbearing influence of governors who have captured the entire infrastructure at the local government level, and it's unable to deliver development to the people. So how are we sharing power between the federal and the state to the local government to encourage and enhance participation? The other point is when you think about power sharing, politicians have this arrangement, whether they call it zoning, in terms of political representation. The fundamental question, across board is, since 1999 till date, have we addressed those structural inequities that keep certain sections of our country marginalized? My answer is no. We've paid lip service to those issues. That is why you still have those contestations and agitations from different parts of the country that they don't feel included. And if democracy is hinged on inclusion and you still have people feeling excluded, then something is wrong about the way we are operating democracy, not democracy itself.
And you've really begun to touch on, the next and most ideal point of the conversation when you talk about devolution of powers. And, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Ms. Olisa Agbakoba, has released a document. The title escapes me now, but there are some high points of some of what he said in that document when he said, you know, development under this administration cannot be truly meaningful with the system of government because it cannot be topmost to the bottom, but from the bottom and then it reaches everyone. And he said in that document, Mr. Itodo, the president can immediately transfer specific functions to state and local governments through executive orders. He also says in that document, the National Assembly can utilize sections 4, subsection 1, and sections 315, subsection 1, subsection 1A of the Constitution to replace the 1999 Constitution and prioritize devolution of powers and fiscal federalism. Pretty much saying that our current federalism is pseudo, is a phantom federalism. Can this approach to speedy constitutional amendment, is it possible under this administration? Do you sense, Mr. Itodo, that this can be achieved?
I think that there's no doubt that we have a precedent, at least for the first time. Well, not necessarily the first time, because President Buhari, you know, did pass executive order on direct allocation to local governments. But we've seen actions from the current president is geared towards strengthening local government system. The National Assembly is also, you know, considering the constitutional amendment bill that strengthens local governance. So if you take these actions, you can say in terms of the body language, yes, there's reason to believe that there's commitment towards this. However, when you think about the implementation of the Supreme Court's judgment, the time it took to implement and how it's been implemented, it gives us serious cause for worry. But the actual problem is at the states. And the question is, are the governors willing to cede some of their powers to the local governments? The current position that I have seen is that the governors are reluctant to promote or advance any reforms that empowers local government. They still want to control local governments, which reinforces this debate as to the different tiers of government that we have. Is it the federal and the state and the local governments, or we have only two component units, the state and the federal? I think that we need to underscore the fact that yes, there can't be development if people don't feel governance at the local level, and that is local governments. And so how we advance those reforms are critical. And I hope that the political class will build consensus on this particular issue. And I hope bipartisan consensus, because one of the challenges of our democracy after 26 years is that our political class, whether they're the ruling or the opposition, have not built consensus on fundamental issues of state building. And one of them is local governance. Just building consensus, bipartisan consensus as an instrument of development is a big challenge for our political class. And I hope that on this issue of local governance, they will build consensus and devolve power to the local government in a way that it's sustainable and it delivers development to people at the local level.
You know, some would say the law is what the political class makes it. Mr. Kitobe, I'd like you to respond to that. Do you see a semblance of political will in the disposition of this administration to make devolution of powers possible?
Well, President Tinubu was a champion of this notion of restructuring before he came into office. He was a major advocate of the fact that the political structure needs to be rejigged. But since he's come in, it's been a half-hearted, lukewarm effort to implement real structural adjustment. Yes, he's done some work in terms of strengthening the local government, but I don't think you can achieve much by piecemeal, through a piecemeal approach using executive orders. I think what is required is a wholesale catharsis, whereby you break down the entire structure and rebuild from the ground up. I think if you try and do it by executive orders, as my co-panelist has said, the governors can frustrate it. I remember Governor Soludo doing of Anambra State doing an end run around the Supreme Court decision that insisted on strengthening the local government, and he came up with a diversionary tactic by where he was able to legally circumvent what the Supreme Court ordered the governors to do. So I don't think it's enough to use a piecemeal approach. I think an entire wholesale amendment, and so to achieve that, I think there has to be a sort of constitutional conference, because amending the constitution is not very easy at all. You have to get both houses at the federal level to pass it, then you have to go through the states and get 2/3 of the state houses of assembly to accept it as well. So I think there's got to be a conversation, a national one, where we all sit down at the table, we all agree on how we want to be governed. Let's remember that our togetherness was imposed, was enforced by people who didn't understand our ways, people who came from somewhere else and for their own selfish interest created a structure that was more beneficial to them than to us. And we've been trapped in that structure since even before 1960 independence. So we've now come to terms with the fact that this doesn't really work best for us. The best times Nigeria has had, the very best times Nigeria has had, was post-independence, before the first military interregnum, and that's because we were running a regional structure where each region had its own resources, was allowed to develop at its own pace, where governance was internal, and they just each region just paid royalties to the center and relied on the center for security of our borders, foreign affairs, and things that couldn't be handled at the local level. And that was when Nigeria actually made giant strides. If you think about the fact that Western Nigeria got television before countries in Europe. Chief Obafemi Awolowo set up the Western Nigeria television service way before countries in Europe had television. In Western Europe, for that matter. I'm not even talking about the Eastern Bloc. So you can see the kind of progress that's possible when power is devolved to the local units. In fact, the more local the power is diffused, the better development and growth will be. So even at the state level, it's still too distant from the people. So the bulk of the power needs to really be at the local government level. And I don't think you can achieve that through random executive orders here and there that probably will have minimal effect. And so we need to sit down, negotiate our togetherness, come up with a structure that works for everybody. The way God created humanity is that we all have different abilities, different talents, and we will all have different approaches to life and have different strengths and different paces. So each region will do better if they hold their destinies in their own hands individually and are able to work to their own betterment individually. Nigeria is a large and complex country. It's nigh impossible to try to run it as a homogeneous bloc. I've said that earlier. So if it can be politically and economically divided into its constituent units, we'll be better off.
Yeah, complex but not impossible. If there's anything, those would be the gleanings from this conversation. We must thank you very much, Mr. Samson Itodo, Executive Director, Yaga Africa, and Mr. Dayo Akitobi, Media Analyst. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming through on this special Democracy Day edition.
Thank you, and happy Democracy Day.
And happy Democracy Day to you too.
Thank you.
And there's more to come on the program. We'll be taking a short break. When we return, we'll be reviewing your thoughts about some of the trends on social media. Stay with us. We'll be right back.